Hey beautiful people, in last week's video I showed you how to make a pattern for this romper, and today I'm going to show you how to sew it. So if that sounds good to you, then keep watching this video. To sew this romper, you're gonna need 2 to 3 yards of non-stretch fabric of your choice. You're gonna need matching threads, a romper pattern. You're gonna need fabric scissors, a pin cushion with pins. You're gonna need a ruler, tracing paper, and a tracing wheel. You're also gonna need a pencil, 1-inch elastic, 1/2-inch elastic. And if you haven't already watched last week's video, then check the description box down below to learn how to make this pattern. If you'd like to slow this video down or speed it up, then definitely follow the following instructions. So to get started, you want to cut 2 pieces for the top of your romper, and you're going to make sure that your fabric is folded when you're doing this. Fold it right sides together or wrong sides together. You should have 2 pieces looking like this, and you're going to repeat the same thing for the back of the romper as well as the front of the romper. What I'm doing here is using my tracing wheel to trace the darts on the shorts of my romper onto the actual fabric. So I'm placing my tracing paper with the chalky part down on my fabric, and I'm putting my pattern on top and using my tracing wheel to trace over the dart legs. That's gonna print on the fabric. And I'm doing that on both sides, making sure that the colored side of my tracing paper is down on the fabric, because that's what I want to print on the fabric. I'm doing this so that I can have a guideline when I'm ready to stitch my darts. I'm now cutting out the front of my romper, and I'm repeating the same thing on the front, tracing over my darts. I'm doing that on both sides. And next, just to make it a little bit easier for myself, I'm using this ruler to just draw over the lines that I traced, because they're not very bright. So when I use my pencil, what that does is that it gives me a clear guideline as to where I'm going to be stitching when I'm ready to stitch my darts. I'm doing this for the front of my shorts, and I'm also doing this for the back of my shorts. So that's all 4 shorts pieces. Once that's done, I can cut out the 4 pocket pieces for my romper, and you should end up with the back and front shorts pieces for the romper, the pocket pieces, as well as the top pieces. So what we're going to do now is to start off with the shorts of the romper. I am measuring 1 inch, 1.5 inch down from the top of my shorts, and I'm placing my pocket there. And now I can align both pieces of my shorts together and make sure the pockets are in line, and I'm putting some pins here along the outseam to join the pocket to the shorts. Next, I'm going to take it to my sewing machine, and I'm going to sew along this line with a 1/4 inch allowance. So it should be looking like this, and you're doing this for all 4 shorts pieces. Next, I am turning the raw edges of my shorts inwards. So that's with my pockets actually turned away from the shorts. So it should be looking like this. Now I'm going to take it to the sewing machine, and I'm going to top stitch along the edges of where I pinned, just like this. I'm removing my pins as I go along, and I made sure to back stitch at the top And I'm also going to be back stitching at the bottom just to secure that stitch. Once that's done, all 4 of your shorts pieces should look this nice and flat. And to make it even flatter, I'm ironing mine, so it would be nice if you could do the same. Now place the 2 front pieces and the 2 back pieces wrong sides together and pin and stitch along the inseam with a 1/4 inch allowance, just like this. Next, you're gonna turn the pieces right sides together along that very same seam, and you're gonna pin and stitch along the inseam, this time with a 1/2 inch allowance. This is a French seam and it should look like this. Iron it flat, and this is an alternative to using a serger, so if you don't have a serger, then not to worry, French seams are here to save the day. Now we're gonna stitch the darts. To stitch the darts, clip into the dart legs on the front and the back pieces of your shorts, and then fold those clips to meet each other, and make sure that the peak that's at the bottom actually matches up. And you're going to put some pins into it. You're going to do that for all 4 darts, so that's 2 darts on the back of the shorts and 2 darts on the front of the shorts. When they're pinned up, they should look like this, and we're going to take that to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch from top to bottom, following the lines that we drew and making sure that we taper off when we get closer to the end. If you don't taper off, you're going to end up with some very sharp darts, and that's going to make your darts look very pointy instead of flat. You can go ahead and iron your darts so that they will look nice and beautiful and crisp. What I'm doing here is just matching the waist of my shorts to make sure that it matches with the top of my romper. And now I'm placing my shorts right sides together. That's the back of the shorts and the front of the shorts, and I am pinning down the out seam and around the pockets on both sides. And once that's done, I can take it to the sewing machine and stitch around where I have pinned. So pay close attention here. I am stitching down to about 1/2 inch into my pocket where you see my finger. I'm stitching with a 1/2 inch allowance here. And what I'm gonna do is leave my needle down in my fabric. I'm gonna raise my presser foot and pivot my fabric so that I can now stitch along the edge of my pocket, and I'm doing that with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And I'm doing that all the way around to the end of the pocket. And when I get to the end of the pocket, I'm gonna stitch into about 1/2 inch of the out seam, and then I'm gonna leave my needle in my fabric. I'm gonna lift my presser foot, pivot, and then I'm gonna stitch straight down to the hem, making sure that I back stitch. I did that on both sides, and now it's time to join the crotch of my shorts. What I did here was to take the crotch and place it wrong sides together. I pinned along there and I stitched with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, just like this. And now I can turn my shorts the other way, and along that same seam I'm pinning again, And this time I'm gonna stitch with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So it's gonna end up looking like this, nice and clean finish. And now to do the hem, I am folding up by a 1/2 inch and folding again. So I folded up by 1/2 inch twice, so that's 1 inch in total, and I'm pinning all the way around. And once I've done that for both of the legs of my shorts, I can take that to the sewing machine and stitch along the edge, removing the pins as I go along. To make this look really nice and crisp, I'm using my iron to just iron those hems flat. This is how they will look. And I'm just gonna stitch about 5 inches from the bottom of my shorts. So I'm placing my presser foot there and I'm stitching down to the bottom of my shorts. And I did that for both sides of my pockets, just so that they won't be so deep. What I'm doing here is folding the top of my shorts in by a 1/4 inch and pinning all the way around. And once that's done, I can take it to the sewing machine and I can stitch along the edge. It's gonna look just like this, and we can actually move on now to the top of the romper. The first thing you want to do is to place the 2 pieces wrong sides together and put pins along the sides. Stitch along there with a 1/4 inch allowance, just like this, and then we're gonna turn it inside out and pin along those very same seams once more. This time, however, we're gonna stitch with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. It should be looking like this. And I'm just gonna take my iron once more and I'm just gonna press my seams flat just so that it will look nice and crisp. So I have turned my romper inside out once more and I'm folding the top down by a 1/4 inch and pinning all the way around. In fact, I am actually doing that for the top and the bottom of the top of my romper. So it should look like this once it's pinned up, and when you stitch along, you should end up with something looking like this. Now what I'm doing is matching the top and bottom side seams, just like what you see me doing here. I'm putting pins in and then I'm using my scissors to make some notches at the sides, just like this. And this is so that I can match it up with the shorts of my romper. So the side seams of the shorts will match up with the side seams of the top of the romper, and the notches at the front and back of the top of the romper will match up with the seams at the front and back of the shorts. Now I'm taking it to my sewing machine and I'm stitching with a 1 inch allowance. As you can see, I'm using my throat plate as an indicator, the throat plate on my sewing machine that is, and I'm stitching around with a 1 inch allowance. If you turn your romper out like this, you'll be able to try it on to see if it can pass your hip and if it can sit on your bust as well. Now you want to take your 1 inch elastic and measure and cut your elastic about 3 inches less than your waist circumference. You're gonna overlap and stitch along there, and with your 1/2 inch elastic, you're gonna cut this 3 inches less than your above bust circumference and stitch it together. And what I'm doing here is folding my elastic to find the opposite side of the seam that I used to join them together, and I'm pinning that to the back and front of the romper. So what I'm doing here is stretching as I go along. I'm stretching as I go along between the pins. That's what's gonna create the scrunchy effects that you're seeing here. And I'm folding my elastic down and pinning it, but for some reason my phone did not record me stitching that down. So what you're gonna do is just stitch that down along the very edge and stretch as you go along, just as we did before. Here I am pinning my elastic to the top of my romper, and I'm stitching around once more. And with that being done, I can fold my elastic down and stitch around again. And as you can see, we're getting that scrunchy effect. If you found this video helpful, give it a thumbs up, share it with a friend, and make sure that you're subscribed for more sewing content from the Quaint Boss. If you want a daily dose of positivity, follow me on Instagram at Quaint Boss. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one.